So the deck of the hour right now is the new Ruby Sapphire Hiram PAWPSICLE Control. This deck has basically replaced what Ruby Amethyst was in the first chapter in being the kind of late game control deck, and a lot of people are seeing this as the deck to beat right now, and because it has a very good matchup against Amber Steel, which Ruby Amethyst suffered against in the first chapter, people automatically are thinking that this will be the best deck. I made a video about this already, breaking the deck down, which I will link in the description. There are a lot of different updates that you can make, tech options, etc. So the list you're seeing on screen here isn't necessarily the definitive list. But what I want to do in this video is actually look at one of the matches that I played that gives this deck a bit of trouble, and that would be Emerald Amethyst. So let's go ahead and take a look at that match now. So in this matchup here, we're on the draw, so we're not going first, we're going second obviously, and we mulligan away our uninkables and high costing cards. Unfortunately, we draw into 2 Be Prepareds, which isn't the greatest. Now, when I see Emerald, I automatically think Emerald Steel, but this opponent obviously inked a Madam Mim Snake to start and played the Flynn Rider, so immediately revealing their 2 color combinations, and they start off pretty strong in dropping the Pinocchio on turn 2. With aggro, it can be very difficult to deal with if you let them get too far ahead, because even if you get your item draw engine off, you just can't drop your Be Prepared fast enough sometimes before they just build up enough advantage to win the game. And that can be a bit problematic, especially if Kuzco starts coming back into the format with its ward ability. Yes, Tremaine can get around it. Yes, Be Prepared can get around it. But aside from that, you can't target it with Maleficent or Hades, and those are your other big drop removals. So you can see my opponent comes out of the gate pretty aggressively. Being able to stop that Pinocchio actually made a world of difference here, and then forcing them, not really forcing them, but them using their Madam Mim to replay their Flynn, put them back a little bit on tempo. They still have control of the match, but you can see how much of a dire strait we are in. They have card draw inherently with purple that we don't have. We need to see a combination of cards in order to do that, and that's one of the inherent weaknesses with this deck. In order to not miss a beat on curve and try to just get up to a 7 ink as fast as possible, I just crash my Grammatala so that I can get her as ink and use her next turn, and I'm forced to ink the Nick there so that I can at least drop Gaston into Be Prepared. But this board presence here is pretty threatening because this Kuzco will live one more turn if they bounce it back, which most likely they will. And sure enough, yeah, there's the bounce to protect the Kuzco. Now they can't recast Kuzco at this point, so they end up casting the Flynn Rider instead. And instead of just jumping straight into the Be Prepared, because I know they have the Kuzco in hand, I'm going to play my Gaston. They have 4 questing power on board, and I'm fine letting them go to 12 if it means it makes them commit more to the board. So that's why we opt to play Gaston there and play the PAWPSICLE instead of going for Be Prepared. And sure enough, the opponent does play the Kuzco again, and then quest with everything up to 12. And then next turn, they would be threatening to go to 19, I believe. And so obviously that would be very hard to deal with. So we quest with the Gaston, and then we use the Be Prepared. We ink one of the Harems because we can't play it now that we've cast Be Prepared. Or actually, oh, I don't ink it. I value keeping the second one in my hand. Interesting. The opponent drops Arthur and Flynn Rider and passes. I guess didn't know that they didn't end up passing their turn, so the timer came up. I'm just waiting there, and then they kind of acknowledge it by saying whoops. All good though. So in this scenario, I'm thinking, like, is it worth playing ink, or do I just go just pass? You could argue I should be inking the Gramma there. I think that would have been the right play. So not doing that is likely, a misplay. Definitely will ink the Minnie Mouse though, and then drop a Hiram here in order to draw 2 off of the PAWPSICLE Vanish, and then I'm able to play the Grandma as well as the 1 jump ahead, which I did switch to compared to the start of the list that I used or in the video the other day where I was using Mickey's instead. The 1 jump ahead just gets you more tempo control over the Mickey, which is just the 1 turn slower does make the difference because you can see how critical it is that you get up to your 7 ink. So the opponent is able to double quest with the Hans and the Olaf here. Thankfully, we're on 10 ink and double Maui, so we can deal with both of these threats. And we're slowly clawing advantage back now that we have board control. We have no more engine though, which is a problem, and all it takes is the opponent to slap down a couple of high questers, and we just can't deal with it because we have no way to deal with warded characters right now, or just with characters that are ready. So the John Silver comes down and makes it so that my Hiram can't quest, but thankfully we draw into the shield, which we're able to banish and draw 2. And now we're able to kind of just load up on items, and we have the Hades for removal as long as there's not a ward character on board. So ward with aggro is still a problem for this deck if you don't draw the Tremaines and the Be Prepared. And like I said in my other video, once people start learning how to play around Tremaine, this deck will become a lot less consistent. It is still very strong, and it will be very strong, but it does have certain matchups where it loses, and this is one instance where I should have definitely lost. Now the opponent opts to bounce back their John Silver and opt to just leave the Pinocchio on board, saying, you know, you better have an answer for this Pinocchio. And with Hiram here, I definitely will. The opponent, I guess, made a misplay. I don't know if they thought they had game, but you made it so my grandma couldn't quest, when you definitely should have made it so that one of the Hirams couldn't quest, because that just gave me a draw 2. I still had the answer, so in the end it didn't make a difference, but you know, you just want to make the right plays at all times. Even if you think you're going to win, don't mess around, because you never know what can come back to bite you. So at this point now, knowing that the opponent is not on board wipes, and this is one of the detriments if this deck doesn't win very fast, and it potentially could have won, I think, right, if I didn't have like that teeth to get rid of the Pinocchio at the start. If it was able to quest even once for 3 lore, it would have been really, really bad for me. But now I have threats to drop. And the weird thing here is that if the opponent dropped a Cusco, I'm forced to be prepared, right? That's insane. Look at the board that I'm about to be prepared here. I give my opponent a well played because they almost won. They drop an Elsa, which does technically let them survive for 1 more turn, and it basically forces me to say, or they're forcing me to say, I have to have an answer for your Elsa, otherwise I lose, because they're preventing me from getting to 20 lore by tapping both those things down. And as long as I had any removal spell, so a Tremaine, a Maleficent, even a Be Prepared that I would have to be forced to use to wipe my own board, the Elsa wouldn't win the game. So that was basically their only chance there. They spend some time, I guess, thinking about if it's possible to win here, but they end up conceding, and that was a hard-fought match. We're going to go on to the second match now, and once again, we mulligan away our high-end cards, and our opening hand looks fantastic, and we're going first. So this one should be a really easy match, right? Well, let's take a look at how it develops. So being on the play and being able to drop a turn 1 Popsicle is really strong here. I also have the Hiram in my hand and enough Inkables that I can get on my curve quite nicely. Well, maybe not play a card on curve every single turn, but I have what I need in order to progress the game state to where I need it to be, which is get the item draw engine online. But this is not necessarily an auto win, as many people are thinking when they see this deck in action, and they're just like, oh my goodness, you know, you flood the board, you get so much advantage. How is it possible that you lose when you get this setup? It seems so overpowered. And it's good, like I keep saying, but it's not broken. In this scenario, the opponent is able to just aggro out a lot of threats. The Emerald Ruby combination is quite dangerous because they threaten a lot of evasives on the Ruby side. They might also have some removal, and obviously green, as we just saw in the last match, also has a lot of aggro options. The Emerald Amethyst version that focuses around bouncing cards is actually more threatening because they can do things like play Merlin Goat, bounce Merlin Goat, or bounce back threats after questing with them, like the Pinocchio, and recast them so that they're not exerted and vulnerable. And it basically forces you to have spot removal every single time they play a threat. And with the Amethyst build, they're not necessarily running out of resources and getting into top deck mode because Amethyst draws you cards. And this is one of the ways that the Ruby Amethyst might have been a little bit more consistent than the Sapphire Ruby variant, because you inherently have card draw, whereas with this version you definitely need to make sure that you see specific combo pieces in order to get your draw engine online. Now keep in mind that it's usually not too difficult to see those draw pieces, but if you go 5 or 6 turns without seeing a Hiram, that could be really, really bad, right? And you'll run out of gas really quickly. You'll likely draw into very high costing cards that you can't play, and you'll be in top deck mode sooner than you could do anything, basically. So my opponent continues to go very wide here, and again, people are going to start learning how to play around this deck, but obviously I made some very odd plays in order to try to optimize my way into a Be Prepared here. And the opponent has game on board, so it's Be Prepared or bust at this point, right? And again, if I didn't have that Hiram engine to continue to draw, maybe I don't see a Be Prepared here. So this deck, while it is strong, you can see that it does really rely on you drawing into the cards you need, which again, you likely will do, but there are still instances where that won't happen. You can go again like 20 cards deep into your deck out of 60 and not see a Be Prepared, and in that instance I lose this scenario, I lose this match straight up, right? Now it looks like I'm in a very strong position, but the opponent here is pretty telegraphed that they have a big Shift Aladdin in hand, and so the goal is that I don't play into it. And I make a very odd play here because I just don't want the opponent to gain anything else. And I'm like, I have total control of this board as long as you don't drop warded characters. My Maleficent and Hades will take care of anything you drop. And if you do have one warded character, I at least have Lady Tremaine to deal with it. But with the opponent just passing on nothing, the Tamatoa comes down, and this card is absolutely insane. I would play like 4 of this if I could, but I'm just doing the 2 for right now. And you know, it will get removed if it's played. It will definitely get removed because it's too big of a threat. Yeah, as you can see here, the opponent had the Dragonfire, which in my previous video around the Ruby Sapphire deck, I mentioned about how Lady Tremaine versus Dragonfire kind of is in contention for which one do I want to use. Some people use both. In this deck, the Lady Tremaine is considered the better choice, but even in my opponent's deck here, you see the difference that a Lady Tremaine would have had there. They would have ended with a body, whereas Dragonfire just straight up removed the threat 1 for 1, and they would have ended with a 2 questing body. Anyways, in this instance, I make a misplay by questing with the Robin Hood, but fortunately, the game saves me here by letting me draw into a shield, which you definitely want to play more of in the deck, I think. Not because Aladdin is a threat, just because you have so much ink that you can utilize shield really well in this deck, and shield is very, very good, right? I know from playing Ruby Amethyst, I used to play 3 shield in that deck, cut it to 2, but it was still very, very good, and you know, you would see it more often than not, even with 2 copies because of how much draw you have. In this deck, same concept, 2 or 3, maybe even 3 because you banish ones and you want to see another one. It's just that good, right? And to recast it for 1 is nothing. At this point though, the evasive threat is probably the bigger threat here, but not being exerted means Robin Hood can't challenge it. So essentially I have to decide how I want to go about removing this, and I'm thinking Hades to remove the Tinkerbell, and then that leaves me with 3 ink so that I can quest with the Robin Hood and ready it up, because even if the opponent has a Shift Aladdin, the Hiram has 6 toughness, so the Aladdin at 5 strength will not be able to overcome the Hiram. They can deal 5 damage to it, but they don't get the additional 2 lore and claw 2 lore away from me. And Aladdin challenging into something is potentially a win condition, but in a Ruby Emerald deck, it is slow and very telegraphed because you don't have access to Pocket Watch like you do with Ruby Amethyst. And so just like that, we're able to stabilize. And again, Ruby Emerald, they don't have card draw, so they're essentially in top deck mode. Again, unless they top deck like Kuzco and something else to protect it from Lady Tremaine. We have 3 Lady Tremaines in hand and 2 Hades. This game is pretty much over. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section below if you made it this far what you think. A like would be appreciated if you've made it this far, because again, these videos do take a while to edit. So again, thank you so much for watching. Quantum is out. I hope you enjoyed.